for the Florida House of Representatives, District 17, by the editorial board of the St. Augustine Record. We're joined today by current District 17 Representative Cyndi Stevenson, a Republican, and challenger Jaime Perkins, an independent candidate. My name is Mark Cox. I'm the general manager of the St. Augustine Record. With me are opinion page editor Jim Sutton and executive editor Craig Richardson. So to start things off today, we'd like each of you to take about 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background and why you're running for office. And we'll start with the challenger, Jaime Perkins. Jaime, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I am Jaime B. Perkins. I am a lifelong resident of St. Augustine, Florida, born and raised here, graduate of St. Augustine High School, and I'm very proud of that. I am the mother of one son. His name is Micah. He's 13 years old and he attends St. Johns County Public Schools. He's an honor student there. I am a business owner in St. Johns County and own a project management agency that basically helps businesses function better. Have worked within the public and private sector, and I received my master's degree in 2014 in public administration, which was something that kind of was a pivotal moment for me and helping to introduce me more to our political state here in the state of Florida, St. Johns County, local municipalities. And I always knew that I would be in the political realm. Did not think it would be this soon, but no time like the present. So here I am.
Well, thank you. My name is Cyndi Stevenson, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And it's nice to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you. Again, we've met before a little briefly.
I'm a certified public accountant, a lifelong Floridian. I moved to this area, oh my goodness, my husband says more than 35 years ago, but I don't want to tell everything. My husband's family lived here for about over 50 years. And when I graduated from Stetson University, I moved to the Jacksonville area to work for a large public accounting firm. Over 20 years of service in public accounting, I have experience in real estate, healthcare, insurance, and not-for-profit organizations. I have a very diverse work resume. One of the things I did while I was kind of mommy tracking and raising my children was I was a controller for Children's Home Society, which is the largest child welfare organization in the state of Florida. After dealing with a growth management issue in my community, I was drafted by community leaders to run for the county commission. I had never intended to, and I resisted it for some time. I am really grateful that I finally took that challenge, and it has been an honor to serve as a county commissioner here for 10 years. And then in 2015, I resigned to run for the Florida House. I had opted out of my pension many years earlier, took a significant pay cut, and to be term limited. So this was a movement for me to be able to take my understanding of our community and use it to serve the people of St. Johns County and the State House. I know that each community in Florida is different. I've spent a lot of time with Florida Association of Counties and traveled around the state. And it helps me better work with my colleagues there to craft legislation that fits our large and diverse state. It's been an honor to serve, and I'm running so that I can continue to work to make Florida the best place to live, work, play, and to raise a family in our country. And I think if any place in Florida can do that, it's here in St. Johns County.
So the other question is something that you just brought up, and I may have this incorrect, but when you mentioned you started in 2015, don't you have another term? You can go 3 terms because of taking that sort of halfway step into the first term. Both you and Renner
Yes.
is saying, is that true? So you have your first partial term, and then 2 more full terms.
That's correct. I'm eligible, if I prevail in this election, to serve for 6 years, 3 2-year terms.
Is that helping you in positions of seniority? Does that give you any more
I think
brass?
it does. I think it is, for me, it's been an immense benefit. It helps me to have had a chance. I came in and we were going through the end of session, so I got to see how it ended before I got to see how it began. So then it helped me understand how the system works with different people at the helm, how the structure works, but also how the personalities change. It's a fascinating process, how the personalities and who's in what place. And just to learn what's important to people. And it has helped me make friendships with people that had been in the House, now are in the Senate. So I've fully invested my time to be able to optimize that. This year, for example, as a freshman, I was the vice chair of the Healthcare Appropriations Committee. Healthcare is the largest appropriations area in the state. It used to be education, and unfortunately, Medicaid costs have skyrocketed and squeezed out a lot of the healthcare spending, and the other spending areas like education. So I think that it helps. Usually a freshman right off the street wouldn't have that opportunity. My experience as a CPA and different things I've done, being a county commissioner, those are all legs up for me to serve this community better. And that's my objective.
Well, I'd kind of ask the reverse. Jamie, do you see not being part of the establishment, the establishment in Tallahassee is benefiting you?
I think so. There are some individuals in the political realm that are what people refer to them often as career politicians, and I pride myself on not being that. My experience as a retail and mortgage banker, I started in retail and mortgage banking at the age of 18 years old. So because of that, I was able to learn that industry, work my way up to management over a course of 7 to 10 years, and gain experience as a manager in budgeting and allocating of funds and budget assignments, which I think has allowed me to become qualified for this position. Not having the experience or being in Tallahassee, I don't think disqualifies me for this position at all. I think it's more so about the focus on the people and being able to be an advocate for them. And you got to start somewhere. So.
You're done.
Okay. Let's talk about issues specifically, in your opinion, what you think are the top 3 issues facing our state, and Jamie, we'll start this one with you.
To find ways to provide healthcare, quality healthcare to our residents. Economic development is something that's also very important to me when we start talking about increasing minimum wage for residents of public school funding. What we do know is that the money is there. I think the issue is how we are allocating those funds. Ensuring that our teachers are paid what they deserve so that they can provide quality education to our students, and ensuring that our children have the items that they need. Can't quote the site right now or quote the cited source, but I believe there's information that says that our teachers spent almost $1 billion last year on providing funds. And this is throughout the country, not just in the state of Florida, but $1 billion to provide materials and items for their students. And our teachers should not be required to spend their own hard-earned money to provide quality education to our children.
So your top 3 items?
Well,
Or issues, rather?
I think the top 3 items is to continue helping people fill the more highly paying jobs that we have here in Florida that require some skills upgrades. There are some very innovative programs that are taking people from $10 an hour to $20 an hour while they're working to enable them to far exceed any minimum wage limits or anything where they would have, where they might face those little cliffs where there's a reluctance to earn more because you might lose some of your benefits. Those are being coordinated with WorkSource through a 50% tax credit with employers. It's a really great program. They're taking people, for example, in hospitals that are maybe working in laundry and teaching them to be part of the skilled workforce. We have a very tight labor market. This is a time of great opportunity for the people of Florida to rise up and have a more living wage far above any minimum wage we would set. So I think that's where I focus mostly, is trying to help people overcome intergenerational poverty. One of my kind of pet issues in regards to trying to get more affordable health care and help people overcome poverty and unnecessary incarceration is a focus on health care, mental health services to help prevent bigger problems later. I'm very pleased with the progress we made this year. Very saddened at the reason we made so much progress this year because of the death of the students in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. But it has caused an acute focus on mental health and stress that our teachers are reporting in the schools. We find that 70% of the children in juvenile justice have some mental health conditions, 4 to 6 times the number of mentally ill people are in jails as opposed to the regular population. So I see this as just a tremendous opportunity to drive down healthcare, help remove some of the obstacles for people to rise up and come out of those cycles of intergenerational poverty. I've seen so much working in the Children, Families, and Seniors Committee, and in my work as a county commissioner, of what it does to a family when somebody's incarcerated or incapacitated or has losses. So these are things, overcoming those poverty and helping people rise to enjoy the opportunities of Florida.
Okay. Does either one of you want to respond to the other on the platform? Or
I have
viewpoint?
some comments. There's a lot of people who are very interested in making sure everybody has affordable health care. The hang-up seems to be on exactly how to achieve it. Medicaid expansion has some definite, we looked at it very carefully. One of the sessions when I was over there, and one of the problems with Medicaid expansion as it is now is the states will not have the tools to address cost containment the way they need to. We can get waivers, but because it's an entitlement program, people take the states to court, and then those expanded Medicaid are facing billions in higher than expected cost, and a lot of that's falling on the federal government. For the state house, one of the things that concerns us, it certainly concerns me, because we see it both in the local government, in the county government, and in the state government, is the federal government will come on with strong promises, and then when costs are high, back away from them. We've seen that in the Everglades partnership. They're tens of millions of dollars behind on that. They may catch up on it this year, I hope. What would be in the persons with disabilities. The state was supposed to be a 60% partner. The Fed exceeded more than 18%. State of Florida is a relatively low tax state, and in my general revenue, last year I had $1.8 billion that was not in healthcare, healthcare, education, public safety. There's just not a lot of loose change hanging around. So when people ask me about expanding Medicaid, and I was advocated for it, I simply asked them this question. In the future, we will have to raise taxes for it. How would you like me to pay for it?
But Floridians, we're already one of the most populated states, and we're paying into Medicaid, into the pot, but we're not accepting the money coming back from the federal government. Why should we pay twice?
The federal government is going into a deficit to spend.
Right, but that money is going to other states. Why aren't we taking our piece of what we're paying into that pot?
All I will say is when the federal government does not keep their promise, or as we get to where we have the full 10%, my question only is, how are we going to pay for it? And that when I address that to my constituents that called to advocate for it, most of them did not respond in the affirmative. They may change their mind over time. At the time, we had about 800,000 people they said were off the rolls or uninsured. Medicaid has never been associated with care for just people who have low income. It's always been low income with children, seniors, disabled, or medically needy. It may be more appropriate for us to have another program. And what I prefer, or I think would have a lot of opportunity to allow good coverage and cost containment, is a more robust clinic system like the FQHCs and those types of things, investing in that.
Okay, I want to let Jamie respond to this and what you said.
Thank you. And that's precisely my point, is the fact that we do pay into we pay into the system, but we never really get anything in return. And that happens a lot with constituents and residents in the state, where we're putting out funds, but we're not getting anything back. Even with people in my generation who are paying into Social Security, but there's a possibility that we won't even have access to that at some point. So we're paying in, but we're not receiving anything. We're not on the receiving end. So that is something that I do advocate for too, and I understand where you're coming from with that. I'm also an advocate, or would be willing to work on a program like the one Representative Stevenson referenced, with more clinics in this area. I do believe that that's something that would work as well, but also to advocate for a healthier Florida. Healthcare wouldn't be so expensive if we were in a position to have people be more healthy and not need to go to the doctor as much. I was a champion at my previous place of employment prior to starting my own company for helping to start a healthy workplace, igniting workout programs and healthy eating challenges and Fitbit challenges where we walk and get in your steps. Those are things that we should be initiating, I believe, even at the state level, and having funding for. That would, I think, decrease the value or the amount of healthcare costs by having people be healthier. In addition to that, Big Pharma obviously is making lots of money off of people being sick. When we start putting profits before people and taking money from these organizations, we kind of have an obligation to them. So something that I'm also advocate for is, of course, the criminalization and eventually legalization of marijuana, especially for medicinal purposes, which we now have here in the state of Florida, but I believe it's an oil-based program. But I am an advocate for that because I do think that that would help to increase a more healthier environment here in the state of Florida.
Okay. Cyndi, the Republicans have continued, and I will say Republicans because there's a Republican in the governor's mansion. We can say it's the Republicans, but a lot of people, including the newspaper, can't understand why I would say the House and Senate continue to sweep funds from the Sadowski Act that were specifically set aside for affordable housing that are not going there. The land conservation amendment, which was specifically set aside for those. And now even the medical marijuana amendment of 2 years ago, and it's 2 years later, and the courts are still forcing the House and Senate to do something rather than nothing on that. Why is that? Is that okay to take those things?
That was a lot of questions. Which one?
Is it okay to take money out of, to spend money that was specifically set aside by voter initiatives for affordable housing, conservation purchases, and the medical marijuana?
Was Sadowski a constitutional amendment, or was that
It was a
legislation?
constitutional amendment.
I don't think that this trust funds should be swept, except for when there's a serious issue. And if we have a problem with that that the funds have been set aside for things that aren't the biggest needs of the day, that we need to go back and talk about it. I think there's no doubt that affordable housing is one of the most important needs of the day. At least certainly for a community like ours in St. Johns County, to have workforce housing. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years here, we haven't done much that's permanent, like creating land banks and things like that, where the housing that's created remains affordable for more than one or two owners. So that's very important. I know this last session I know they were really strained to get everything accomplished. You asked me about the Everglades, not the Everglades, the Amendment 1 money. It is the legislature's position that they are spending the money in accordance with the amendment. Included a lot more than just conservation land. It included conservation land and maintaining it and improving access to it. And it is I believe it also included water, because now we are committing in the plan that came out a few years ago to spend a significant amount of that money to clean up the Everglades and to protect the springs and recover Lake Apopka. Those are three. I think the estimated is $255 million a year. With that program, we have to remember it wasn't new money. It's the public setting the priorities for this. So there are some things that we were already doing that's natural that we will want to. It's not like it was new, fresh money. We are spending money. We began spending money on it this year on land acquisitions and less than fee acquisitions of development rights. Because once we acquire the land, then we have to also take care of it. There was a third thing you threw in there to me.
It's the medical marijuana. It's still just not.
Medical marijuana. You know, the really frustrating thing to me about medical marijuana is that I wasn't really there when they were developing the plan, but I've watched year after year, and everybody's fighting over who gets those licenses, and they sue, and then that delays it more, and then somebody else sues, and I think some of them are out and producing now. I think that there will also be some that may come back and try to acquire each other. But a lot of the obstacles that we've had to overcome have to do with banking. You know, we're issuing cards. I think we've really tried. But we've had a series of lawsuits. They had some delays getting the cards done. One of the things that has complicated that, I've learned, is the way the amendment was written. It doesn't give the authority to the legislature, and it's now in an agency that's not used to promulgating policy. So it's very frustrating, to say the least. I honestly, some of the states said, did five plants in your backyard personal use might have been the best thing we ever did, just because I think the way it is now, it's all a money grab. So, that's part of what I see in that.
Thank you, Jen.
Something that Representative Stevenson said just kind of stood out to me. She said more serious issues, and I just don't understand that, because what determines what's a more serious issue? Because what might be more serious to me may not be more serious to her. Land conservation may be very important to environmentalists and people who want to ensure that we preserve land and our natural resources, whereas affordable housing may be important to those who are living in public housing or cannot afford to live where they are. We know that the St. Johns County and St. Augustine housing the amount of affordable housing is going up. I think they're building a new, what should be considered, or what is being considered affordable housing here near our county offices. And when I looked up the rates, it's like $1,000 for a 2-bedroom. And I don't know anybody who can afford that. I don't know anybody. So affordable housing could be important to others. And then medicinal marijuana for a patient who says that, you know, that's the only type of treatment that works for them, that's something that's important to them. So a serious issue is a serious issue depending on who you're talking to. So
If I may then say, it's a more pressing issue then, because sometimes things are important, but sometimes there's urgent needs like a hurricane or those kind of things. I beg your pardon for that.
So when we're thinking about, to just answer your question, no, we should not be moving funds. When we tell our constituents, our residents, that this money is put aside for this, then I feel that we should be doing everything in our power to ensure that that's where those funds go. And that's just my very candid response to
In
that.
the case of all three, those were our residents telling our legislators.
Where
that's
those funds
where
correct.
money should
Thank
be.
you. And it's not there. So yes. That's my answer. The funds, if we say that funds are going to go to where our residents request that funds go, place and there's yes.
The question for both of you, are charter schools, is that the way we should be heading towards more charter schools and financing charter schools and vouchers?
I
Are
don't,
you asking me?
Yes.
No.
I don't think so.
No. I don't think so. Public school, I'm a product of public school. I went to Hartley Elementary, Otis Mason Elementary, the first year that it was opened in 3rd grade. So that makes me, I don't know, maybe extremely young or old to some. Murray Middle School, prior to the new program that they have there now, was a product of Murray Middle School and a product of St. Augustine High School. And things that I learned in the public school system, I think are what made me who I am today. And I don't think that we should be taking funding away from our public school system, creating that voucher program to create charter schools. No, absolutely not.
So the voucher program is completely separate from the charter. My understanding is the voucher program saves, the Opaga reports say, saves the state tens of millions of dollars because when students go to a private school, the voucher they get is much less than the spending they would have had in the public school system. That may be a little different for the McKay scholarships for the very developmentally needy. There's about 92,000 children in the voucher program now. So basically in that situation, I have a parent putting some money with a voucher probably to pay for a private school setting. It is supposed to, from what I've read, cost beneficial, not even cost neutral. So it may be looked at simply as a cost savings and an alternative for parents. But charter schools, they have recognized some success in the state. There are places where they have been championed by their community to give people a choice to get out of chronically failing public schools. I personally really prefer the community in schools approach like we have at Southwood here in St. Johns County and a number of other schools, because it deals not only with what's going on with the student in the school, but if it's a community that has a lot of poverty and crime issues, it also deals with what's going on in the community. And I think that is my favorite way to deal with the failing school system, because you really ultimately have to get to the root of the issues.
How about the way it's paid for, though? Because the money for the charter schools comes out of the district's pot of money, and there's really no say that the district has in it. Someone can open up a charter school, and that money to fund that charter comes from the district's pot, and that lessens the pot for all the kids going to public schools. So do you think that's a wise way? Whether you might think charter schools are a great idea, but is that a smart way to fund them?
I think that it's important that we sufficiently fund our public schools, and if there is a desire to have an alternative school system, that it be funded. And I
Out of a separate revenue source.
Yes, and I believe we have. It's not just in the schools. The state of Florida, most of our revenue comes from dock stamps, which are significantly obligated to the Amendment 1 funding, and 5.5 cents sales tax on purchases. We have corporate income tax. We have sales tax on commercial leases. We have a lot of business taxes that are layered up. Actually, businesses are kind of moderately medium taxed when you add them all together, and individuals are low tax. But we're a relatively low tax state, and we've had this recession, very cyclical revenue, with our sales tax going down, and we're still piecing together. There's things that we're still not fully recovered from in my book, and we've been hit by 2 hurricanes and now a third. But do I think it's wise? I think it's appropriate only that we sufficiently fund our public schools. I think that has to be a priority, adequately funding our public schools, especially a school system like St. Johns County. We need to look for ways to make sure that there's enough funding to have the right kind of teachers to help our kids succeed. In other parts of the state, like corrections and other areas, we also have funding issues. I mean, people whose lives are at risk. So we have I think, a compensation issue in various parts of the state budget. Last year, we were able to help out some of the kids, the groups that do child protection team work. It's emotionally very difficult work. We were able to increase staffing and adjust their pay. I think last year we would have put more money in the schools, but we had an urgency. And when I say sometimes things are more important, low-income housing would still be important last year, but the urgency was to address school safety. I, among other members of the Florida House, were very concerned about repeat offenders, especially with the level of publicity that event got. And we knew that we needed to take concrete steps to make our children safer immediately. So that, and we worked very hard on that, and the schools are working very hard to implement it, along with law enforcement and others. And I think we're making progress on that. But I do think there needs to be more funding in the public school systems. How I'd really rather answer that question.
This is the issue that I'm having with Representative Stevens' response. Charter schools wouldn't even be necessary if we were doing what we were supposed to do with our funding for public schools. The reason why underserved and underprivileged communities open charter schools are because they're not getting what they need in public schools because there's no funding for books. We are not paying our teachers. There is turnover rate for teachers in especially in underserved communities is above average. And communities take the initiative to start charter schools and hope to give their children a quality education. If we were putting an ounce of the energy and funding that we put into the possibility of creating charter schools, we wouldn't need to we wouldn't need to have charter schools. We wouldn't have to take those funds away from public school systems and place into other organizations where parents feel it necessary to start a charter school to educate their children. I love what Alexis Ferguson is doing at the Webster School, which is the community-based school in West Augustine. And he's doing a great job. And if we initiated more programs like those with our public schools and divulged more of our resources into those type of programs, I think we continue to do great with our public school system, and people wouldn't feel the urge to create charter schools.
I think there are still some parents that I've come across that have the school system, even St. Johns County school system, don't meet their needs. But I do believe, I agree with you that if the needs were more fully met, there'd be less of a demand for them. I do concur with that.
Let's stick with schools if we could, and talk about teacher pay. St. Johns County is the state's top district, as you both know. It's something the county touts, and it's a reason a lot of people move here en masse. I think to the frustration of some who are already here. Yet the average pay for teachers in St. Johns County is about $1,000 less than the state average. We had about $47,000 rounding up, but we're 45th in the nation. And the average for a public school teacher in the country is about almost $60,000. Why do we fall so short, and what can be done? Cindy, you want to start?
Why do we fall so short and what can be done? I think that one of the reasons I focus on trying to get the healthcare funding down is to make more room for the other priorities, which we spend most of our state budget on seniors and children and very vulnerable adults. So I think it's a funding question. And in St. Johns County in particular, we do not get our fair share. There are out-of-date formulas. I know Senator King a number of years ago worked on those formulas. We worked on it this year and were able to get St. Johns County 70% more than the average, state average for funding. So we were able to get some compression funding that allowed some more flexibility for the schools this year. I think the other thing that the schools talk about, school district talks about, but hasn't brought back to me is the idea of more flexibility for a high-performing school district to be able to determine where the funds go. So much goes into these different categories that they feel they may be able to make better decisions that way. I certainly would support that. But I do think they need more resources in the system. St. Johns County now has $40 million a year in sales tax to build new schools, which they need because they're growing at a rapid rate. And they're charging some pretty steep fees to new developments under their school concurrency program. I've heard as high as $22,000 a year. So I haven't really fully looked through their budget. They have good reserves. Some of that money may be money that's set aside for future construction. But I suspect from just an operating standpoint that they need the funding that for per pupil funding is at a record level, but it has not kept pace with population and inflation. And that's a more honest measure of it. So I think we do have work to do here. Absolutely.
When it comes to population, I don't think they were forecasting. We are just putting buildings up, and as a matter of fact, I spoke with some residents in the north end of the county a few weeks ago, and their biggest issue was that if the school was built and within a year of the school being there, I believe it was Creekside actually, within a year of the school being there, they had about 7 portables outside because there was no forecast done. They just, they built a school, and so we need to put more resources into forecasting and learning how many, we have so many people moving to this area, but we're not taking the initiative to ensure that we have the space for these students in their school. To answer your question, why are we falling short? It's because we're not putting our teachers first. We're not making them a priority. There are other things that our money is being spent on, whereas and our teachers are not. I'm very proudly recently endorsed by the St. John's Education Association, and the reason why they endorsed me is because I am an advocate for educators. Always have been, even prior to this. My son knows that we treat our educators with the highest regard, because not only is teaching a job or a career, but it's also a gift, and it is a service that our educators give to us, and we should be paying them what they deserve. And although money is not everything, people need to feed their families, and so everybody wants to be compensated for the work that they do. Nobody's going to work for free. And when it comes to teaching our children and providing them with quality education, we need to be providing our teachers with the same. We need to be giving them funds to provide families and not be at work. Met someone in Publix the other night that's a teacher who was working the customer service desk when I was checking out, and she's like, "Oh, I teach in St. Johns County," and my first thought was, why are you at work at Publix at 9 o'clock at night when you worked all day? You should be home rejuvenating and getting ready to teach our children tomorrow. But she wasn't, and that's because we're not paying our teachers enough. So I believe that the funding is there. I just think it's not being allocated correctly, and I think that's what needs to happen in Tallahassee. Is we need to find a way to clear these budget assignments, find out where these funds are going, why are they going to other areas versus paying our teachers and providing quality education to our students.
Cindy, I don't think there's any question if you talk to school administration that back, I guess, in the 2008 the downtime, the legislature actually took millage rates, reduced it by quarter mils or a half mil off. And now we have a county that's having to go to the people for half-cent sales tax to build the schools that we need. Personally, I don't know if you think that's the way it should happen, but to me, it should be the taxpayers are paying for this, not having to go to people for an extra half-cent. But the legislature refused, have not only reduced it, but locked that millage rate down. And I think it's really hamstrung. And it's the capital funding of the schools that's just being killed by the legislature.
Can I?
That some people would say.
Well,
Sure.
the school system did have an opportunity to get that millage rate back. Actually not get that real millage rate back, but keep it. They went to the people on that and did not fully communicate the need, and I think people believed it was a tax increase. The ability to retain the millage, Governor Scott said he was going to take the millage rate, or whoever, the legislature was going to take that millage and reduce it, that they could retain it for a certain number of years if the school board voted for it. And if they wanted to keep it beyond that time, they would put it on the ballot and ask to retain that millage rate. And the millage rate, they lost that vote. And I feel like that was a mistake to not communicate. During the time they were supposed to ask, we were kind of a tax revolt, and I kept encouraging them. You need to communicate on this. The way that ballot language reads, it looks like a tax increase, and people aren't going to vote for a tax increase. You need to communicate aggressively. So then that millage rate fell away. And now, because it's been gone, people would see that as a tax increase because they actually had a reduction as a result of the millage rate going away.
I mean, Representative Stevenson said it. I mean, for a lack of knowledge, people perish, right? They don't know what something means. They're going to vote against it. They're not going to be for it because they don't understand it. And that's another issue that I have with our local government, our local legislation, is that I don't feel like they're there. A lot of people they can't reach the person who's representing them, or local municipalities, or people that are in positions of leadership, especially not in the political area, so they don't know what's going on. We have to be accessible for people to be able to touch us and feel us and know that we're real, so that they can ask these kind of questions. Even after elected, you have to be able to still reach out to the people, host town halls where people can talk to you and have a conversation and ask these hard questions about, hey, this millage rate, I don't understand it. Can you explain it in layman terms so that I can know what I'm voting for? I mean, when there's a question about funding, I talk a lot about the allocation of funds and budget assignments, but I truly am a believer that legalization of marijuana is a great way for the state of Florida to gain more funding. To me, there's other states. You look at Colorado, who was in dire need of funding, and was a very poor state at one point, but they've turned that financial situation around, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Florida has other places that they can look at as to mirror what they've done, and not necessarily be cookie cutter to their program, but we can use those funds to, just like we tax alcohol, just like we tax tobacco, we can tax marijuana and be able to provide additional funds to our schools, so that we aren't having these conversations every legislation cycle. So that's my response to that.
We started a little late, but we're trying to hold about 45 minutes. Do you have anything specific? Either you?
Yeah, I want to touch on environmental.
Can I express my concern about legalizing marijuana?
Sure.
I am not experienced with marijuana, and I know it's become very popular with a lot of people. I just think that we have to use great care in that regard. I was in Denver a couple of years ago, and in a tourist area that reminds me a little bit of the West King, St. Augustine, the main drag. Some of it was good, some of it was not good, but It was there. It was, you know, some of it was more economically developed than others. But there were people walking down the street who were clearly impaired and paranoid, and it was not a lovely picture. While I was there, they had to stop urban camping. The taxi cab drivers told me they were having more accidents recently, 5 to 7% increase in accidents in states that have done it. They're seeing, not that it's an epidemic, but they are seeing more children who are medically marijuana poisoned. Recent studies continue to say that they have a greater effect on a young brain than the adult brain while it's formative. I just think it's something we have to approach with caution. And it's a stronger product than it was, my understanding, 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. But I never smoked cigarettes, so I'm completely out of that real understanding. While there's some really good opportunities for use, it's just, I just careful.
I think that the same goes for during the time of the prohibition of alcohol. I'm sure that people were sitting around the table just like this one, having the same conversation about, you know, people are drinking in this state, and you know, things are happening with moonshine or back then. So I'm sure there was a conversation similar to this one. And even today, though alcohol is very legal and you can walk into pretty much any store and purchase liquor, and we have DUI, driving under the influence rates that are higher in some areas than others. I think the conversation is still one that needs to be had for the legalization of marijuana, just like we had the conversation about legalizing alcohol during that prohibition. We need to have the same conversation, and of course, with anything, you proceed with caution and you ensure that things are regulated so that people in your district, in your area, in your state are not impacted negatively, but it's still a conversation that needs to be had. And what we do know is that there is money to be made, and our state could be impacted in a positive way financially if we were to consider it.
I'll just ask one thing specifically. Are you talking legalizing medical marijuana or legalizing marijuana?
Both.
Cindy?
Medical marijuana is legal. We need to get that process done. The voters voted for it. And in my health quality committees, we pushed and pushed and pushed for fulfillment. And we have one of the, we talked about delays because of lawsuits. Medical marijuana is a fact.
It's a fact you can't get it.
It's
been 2 years.
It's in the legislature. The agents.
The Supreme Court just forced the legislature. Actually, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
But I understand.
We have problems I believe, in the agency and execution, but we have also been delayed by lawsuits.
The agency is under the legislature.
No, the agency is under the governor. I do not control the agency. It's under the governor.
Okay. Great.
Let's switch to the environment quickly. You both list environmental protection as, at least on your websites, as one of your goals and hopes, or one of your values maybe. This year, red tide has gotten a lot of headlines. A good portion of the state has been devastated by red tide. A couple days ago, they were doing tests in Volusia County. They had and we're going to do some tests. So there's a belief as it turned around to the East Coast that it could be heading to St. Johns County. How do you assess Florida's environmental policies, and what would you like to see happen in the year ahead? Start with Jamie.
Okay. There's so much work to be done. And I say this to everyone who asks me environmental questions because I like to be very transparent. I am by no means an environmental guru, but what I do know is that we only have one planet. This is it. and we need to do everything we can to protect it. Florida has some very beautiful and necessary natural resources that we need to protect. And I'm willing to do everything that I can to do that. I'm absolutely against fracking on our coast. I don't think it's something that is conducive to our natural habitat. And if we were to allow fracking in the state of Florida, think we are going to impair our state, our tourists. We make so much money off of being a tourist area. People come here to see our beautiful beaches, to see our beautiful coast. And if you take the BP oil spill, for example, we lost a lot of tourist money during that time on the Gulf side of the state because people thought that our oceans were full of thick oil. You know, and that wasn't necessarily the case, but because that's the perception, people stopped coming here. They were concerned. And if we chance that again, you know, we run the risk of losing tourist dollars yet again. So there is, I think the Senate passed the ban on fracking, but what we do know in politics, things can be reversed and people can write bills. I believe Representative Stevenson actually voted yes for fracking in the state, and it's just not conducive to our environment. So I am an advocate for our environment. And I can't even remember exactly what your question was, but I hope that I answered it because I said a lot.
So,
I'll let you go.
so Florida's economy is, and our quality of life is directly tied to our environment. I grew up fishing and skiing and clamming and crabbing and shrimping in the waters all around the state. So it's very important, not just for beachgoers, but a lot of people come to St. Johns County to fish and play golf. Who knew? I've learned this from talking to people. It's very important driver to our economy. It supplements food for some people. When I was a child, we ate, a lot of what we ate came out of the river and the ocean. So it is good. It is good stuff, and so it's very important. The Ms. Perkins referred to a vote on the ban on fracking.
Mm-hmm.
That has been largely mischaracterized by the environmental community. Both the then current DEP secretary and the prior DEP secretary said fracking was legal in Florida and had in fact occurred. I spoke to the Herschel Vineyard was a DEP secretary at that time, and he said he reached as deep as he could into his regulatory basket to make them stop. And they did $1 million study and did not find any damage from it. However, what I have found from my research is if it is legal, it is in Florida, it is not adequately regulated. The bill that was sponsored said there would be a study of our unique geology to determine what our risks are. So we would understand if it was a public nuisance, if it is, because there are people who have retained property rights on those minerals. And in Florida, you can't just take property rights without a reason, and you have to be able to say so. And if the state of Florida has in fact given those rights, and if we are in fact exposed on them, we need to know if it is impractical to remove them. And if it is impractical to remove them, then we can just ban it. You can't do that. You can't do that here. It's a risk to the water supply. It's a risk to these. It gives us the evidence that we need to go forward on that. If it is able to be made safe, but we don't want them to do it because of some risk to our natural resources, because the location or what have you, we are also then faced with the opportunity to purchase their mineral rights. And part of the offset would be the cost of extraction in a well-regulated regime. So I think I think sadly, and I know it was good for a lot of people to have that to talk about, and it probably raised a lot of money, but the truth is, somebody can come and pull a permit today. I don't think the economics drives it, but that was the purpose of it. Now, a ban could also result in a lawsuit and get us to the same place too. It's just a matter of, at some point we will have to deal with the study and the evidence and work through that issue, because somebody put it on our book some years ago. It doesn't say fracking, but it describes the fracking process. Mm-hmm. And so it is a place we're exposed. I certainly support keeping the offshore drilling ban in place for the state of Florida. And I do not like the idea of anybody doing anything to our, injecting into our aquifer, all those kind of things. Just goes against, I'm a native Floridian, I expect my water down there to be clean. I know that's not always the case, but I certainly think we should protect our groundwater. It's very important.
I think that leads me into something regarding phosphate mining, which is also an environmental issue here in Florida, especially in our Central Florida area. And correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Stevenson, but I believe that you receive a lot of money from phosphate mining organizations. No? Okay. So with that being said, the issue that I have a lot of times with our political leaders is that sometimes we get into this place where people start donating to us and they get in our pocket, and we are required to do certain things or to overlook certain matters. And I'm not, this is my moment to just say that when it comes to the environment, we have to take it very seriously. Phosphate mining is dangerous. Once that water is contaminated, it's contaminated forever. We have that issue in Central Florida right now. People the industry is big, and while it can be helpful to certain other industries, in Florida, it's not. Again, it's just not conducive to our environment. And drilling, the acidification of our water, once that happens, it's done. You can't take it back. So we have to be very careful about when we're talking about our environment. If you want someone that is going to take care of the environment in office, you need to research what they're voting on and what they're doing, because there's some serious environmental issues that are at stake right now. And phosphate mining and hydraulic drilling is one of them, two of them.
So I would like to finish answering the first question that you had about the guacamole, the green stuff coming out of the.
Okay.
So one of the things that I have discovered and am working on is the ground applied sludge from our water treatment plants. The Class B sludge we do not measure the phosphates in it. In 2013, we banned the application of it in South Florida to get out of that troubled water. Now it's starting to cause problems for us in North Florida. And that is something that is unacceptable. The rates of phosphates, that's a nutrient, just like nitrogen. We got nitrogen out some years ago. We need to focus on that. We need to upgrade have it measured and upgrade the ground application of it, if it's going to be used as fertilizer for its beneficial use. It is ridiculous for us to pay to clean up our water than to have it collected in sewer systems like the one I helped get funded for you guys in West Augustine this year, and then to take it to our plant and then reapply the nutrients to our ground. We haven't stopped that problem then. And that is a natural source of phosphates, which is very important as well. So
at the state level for the sewer program, I just want to clarify that I worked on the West Augustine CRA for several years, and particularly on last year, worked with the West Augustine CRA as the infrastructure chairperson. And it was my bid that went to the city that I wrote that allocated those funds through their fund. There was a reserve fund that was put aside by City Manager John Regan, and my bid was the one that created that fund of $425,000 that initiated those mini grants for the sewage program in West Augustine. I do appreciate what Representative Stevenson did just this year in 2018, but we have been working on that project for several years, and I actually reached out to you about that in 2016, and it was kind of pushed aside for several years, and then this year the money was
we tried to get the money last year and the year before, and we got it all the way up, and it got vetoed. This year we got $400,000. While I was on the county commission, we worked a lot on redevelopment and reinvestment in West Augustine.
And I appreciate what you did.
Yeah, a lot. And then we built the Solomon Calhoun Center. We did a lot of work.
Which West Augustine is still in debt for, and they pay all of their TIP funds go to that community every single year. They don't get a dime of it to do anything else in the West Augustine community, not even put up a sign that says "Welcome to West Augustine," because they don't have any access to the budget. But
I'm glad you did that.
No, we didn't get to do it because we don't have access to the budget.
No, you can't.
But I'm not actually on the board anymore.
You didn't donate money for the sign. I thought you donated money for
no, but I would, but I don't have any because I'm working on this campaign right now.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Quite all
Well,
right.
it's great work to work for things to
Yes.
be.
It is.
I appreciate that.
And this is important. I'm not sure everybody understands that this has lowered some of the water bills, but the city provides water to most of West Augustine outside of the city jurisdiction, therefore charges a surcharge. And West Augustine still at this point pays the highest water bills in the county, including Ponte Vedra. So that's why this issue is important about water, and that's something that city and the county have attempted to sit down with, but to sit down didn't do too well. So that's just the background why water is just important. So.
That's right.
Should we conclude and give them an opportunity to say their piece to attend to the
Yeah,
voters?
we're at the limit, so if we can, so why don't you just give a couple minutes to wrap up, and then we'll start with you. So, okay?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak directly to your viewers. And I want to thank you who are viewing for the opportunity to serve this community, both as a county commissioner and now as a state representative. I'm asking for your support so that I can continue to represent you in the Florida House and to solve real problems. It's easy to say that you're going to find money here and there until you've been through that big budget and know how tight it can be. This year, in addition to other challenges, we'll face recovering from the terrible hurricane in the Panhandle. We know what that's like, and I know that will be a costly endeavor, but it's important that we continue the conservative principles that have allowed our community to prosper. And it is important that we invest in things that help people overcome challenges so that they can become productive parts of our community and give back and help support their families. Those are the things that I'm focusing on for you in Tallahassee. We want to keep our community safe. We want to keep our waters clean. We want to keep our communities and families strong. My name is Cyndi Stevenson, Florida House District 17. I'm a certified public accountant. I have 2 grown sons, been married to my husband for 35 years, and I've been serving with you in the Florida House for the last 3. Thank you for the privilege of serving.
I do want to. I didn't thank you when we first spoke. So when you did your intro, you did thank me. So I do want to thank you for this opportunity to even sit next to you, and I appreciate the work that you are doing currently. And I want to thank you all for this opportunity to speak with you and ask the hard questions and get to answer them, and of course to speak to the viewers and the residents that are watching, and that I will later share to my own Facebook page so they can see. I am Jaime D. Perkins, candidate for State Rep, District 17. I stated before, and I'll say it again because I'm so proud. I am born and raised here in St. Augustine, Florida. My family has been here for many generations, great-great-grandmothers on both sides. And I am proud to be from St. Augustine and be a resident of St. Johns County, which is one of the reasons why I never left. Couldn't think of any other be and live and raise my son, my 13-year-old Micah, who is also a product of St. Johns County Public Schools. And I look forward to the opportunity to serve you all in the State House. As a project manager with a background in retail and mortgage banking, someone who's worked very diligently to work their way up the totem pole in the banking and retail mortgage and retail banking industry. It wasn't easy. It was not an easy task, but it was something that I knew needed to be done. I wanted better for my family, wanted better for myself. So I worked very hard to obtain that. I set goals for myself, and then I work for them. And that's the same thing that I want to do when I go to the State House. Set goals and do the work. Compassionate but resilient leadership is what I look forward to bringing to the State House. And while it's easy to say things, I'm a person of my word. I think that my dad and my mom taught me all the time that your word is your bond, and that's not just for guys, that goes for women too. When you say something, you have to mean it. And while the work, I'm sure, is not going to be easy, I'm not one that usually takes the easy way out anyway. So I look forward to the challenge. I'm asking you all to give me an opportunity to serve you in the State House, and I won't let you down.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That wasn't so bad, huh?
It wasn't that bad at all. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you. Early voting started.